In this video, we're going to be going over some of the options of emitters and some of the different kind of things you can emit from. So I've already got a scene open. Let me go ahead and launch the remote viewer so you can take a look at this. And all we've got is a simple omni point emitter right now. So let's go ahead and grab that. And up here, we have our different volume types. If you want to do a volume emitter, you can create it as a point emitter and just change it in the drop down. Let's go ahead. I'm going to pull down the speed on these so they're not moving very much, so we can see clearly where they're being spawned from. Let's go ahead and change this to a sphere emitter. So right now, particles are being spawned anywhere inside that sphere volume, the inner one, because the outer one is actually signifying our omni type emitter. You can see if you have one control with the sphere, you just control the radius. You can make that larger or smaller, and right now these are moving in every direction. The next type of volume we have is a box emitter, and with this you get 3 separate controls. I can go ahead and independently control any of the dimensions of the box, make it bigger or smaller, so we can end up with a very thin plane, which you can see from the side there, or end up with a plane in that direction, or maybe a long thin box. We also have a cylinder, and this has this has a radius and a height dimension. Spawn particles anywhere within there. And one of the more unusual volume types we have is a torus emitter, and this is going to emit them somewhere inside of that ring. In this you have the cross-section radius and the total radius of the torus. So if we pull that down really small, you'll end up with a ring emitting particles. Something else you can emit from is curves. So let's go ahead and draw a curve here. And go in the overhead view. Just draw a simple spiral. And instead of creating a completely new particle system, a new emitter, you can attach emitters to existing particle systems to just emit from the new emitter. And in this case, that's what we're going to do. So go ahead and we select the curve and the particle system. And in the Gamebryo particle shelf, this button here will create a curve emitter and attach it to the selected particle system. So we go ahead and do that. It should immediately pop up. We'll go ahead and delete the original emitter to get rid of the torus emitter. And on this one we can go ahead and increase the rate to try and make this a little bit more visible so you can clearly see the shape of the curve. And this works on any degree of curve that you can think of. The last option that we can emit from is actually polygon meshes themselves. So let's go ahead, polygon here, and draw that out. Of course, it won't show up automatically because this is new geometry that's being introduced to the scene. Let's go ahead and make this a 10 by 10 plane. And we attach this to the particle system just as before. Select the plane, select the particle system, and then on the Gamebryo particle shelf, you select Create Surface Emitter and attach to selected particle systems. And we'll go ahead and delete the curve emitter, and this we'll have to do a refresh to view that in the scene. We'll delete the curve while we're at it. Now you probably noticed by default that it's only emitting from the corners of this. That is expected. If we go ahead and grab the plane and subdivide that further and then do a refresh because we're actually changing the geometry, you'll notice that it's only emitting from certain points, actually the vertices. And let me go ahead again and increase the rate on this so we can see that a little more easily. One of the options, the reason it's only emitting from there right now, if you scroll all the way down to your emitter, once you've attached it as a mesh emitter, you'll notice you have emission type, and this right now is set to from vertices. There's 6 options altogether. You can also emit from the face centers, which you probably notice it looks like there's a few more faces. We should only have 9 faces, and there's actually 18 being generated. Let me pull this back down to a 2 by 2 grid so you can see this more clearly. That's because when you have it set to face center, it's actually emitting from the center of each triangle, and each of these faces is composed of 2 triangles, of course. And this becomes really apparent if we emit from edge surfaces. Now let's pull the speed down so you can see those are the actual edges of the mesh that are getting generated as it's exported, and it's emitting along those faces there. The other options you have, so you can emit from vertices, face center, edge center, face surface, and edge surface. And of all of these, face surface is the most expensive, whereas individual vertices is the cheapest. So if you're using this on a mesh and it has really high vertex density, go ahead and use from vertices. It's going to be a lot cheaper, and only use face surface if you have a relatively low density mesh, but you need complete coverage over all of it. This is also a good example to show, right now it's emitting along the normal. You still have spread control of the particles that are emitted. It'll become more apparent if we increase the speed of these. Right now they're emitting almost in 180 degrees every direction, or we can change it to omni and have them emit in every direction. So let's go ahead and pull this back down to directional and set the spread to 0, so they're only going to emit straight up from the surface. We can also take the speed flip ratio here and put this to 0.5. So now half the particles that are spawned are going to be emitted along the normal of the surface, and the other half are going to be emitted downward from the surface. So that's what you can do with the different kinds of emitters. We have volume, curve, and mesh, and also all of these are animated. I'll go ahead and pull up a scene that's got some animated surface and curve emitters to let you take a look at that. So let's go ahead and launch this. This is the CyberMonkey, a sample that ships with Gamebryo, and all I've done is go in here and add a surface emitter to his head and some curve emitters that are constrained to the bones in his tail. And as soon as this comes up, you'll go ahead and see that moving along with him as it animates. And let's go ahead and just change that to once. So you can see there we have a surface emitter coming out from his head, and then 3 curve emitters along his tail. So that's the different kinds of emitters available in the Gamebryo Rapid Particle Iteration tool.